probably start recording. Very good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Ron Clough. I'm with Manufacturing Works, and we're very pleased to be presenting today's part 2 of a webinar, What's Possible with Smart Manufacturing. And today we have with us Rick Earles from Team Neo, who I'll introduce in just a moment, Kurt Schron from Jergens, local manufacturer, and Erica Fitzpatrick from Team Neo and our Smart Manufacturing Cluster. A little bit about each person briefly. Rick is the Senior Director for Industry and Innovation at Team Neo. Has got over 30 years of experience. Started his career as an electrical engineer. We've got Erica Fitzpatrick, Program Manager for Industry and Innovation for Team Neo, and particularly with our Smart Manufacturing Cluster. And we have with us Kurt Schron, who is with Jergens. He's a Senior Financial Analyst. Started his career in industrial and systems engineering. And interesting background, we've all seen the Capital One commercials, what's in your wallet? I don't know if Kurt knows the answer to that, but he was with them for quite a bit of time in the financial analyst side. Red Ventures. If you've never heard of Red Ventures, you may have heard of companies like CNET or Lonely Planet. Those are some of their brands. And Alley Financial, the banking institution without any brick and mortar. So we welcome each of you, and we look forward to our discussion this morning. And with that, I just want to go over we can advance to the next slide. And I just want to mention, this is the second part. Both parts of this series are available on our YouTube channel. The first part, What's Possible with Smart Manufacturing, was last week. And this part today is really all about Jergens and their journey through multiple implementations of smart manufacturing. And if we can go ahead and advance to the next page. And just very briefly before I introduce Erica, I just want to say on our last session in smart manufacturing, we covered a lot of the essential elements of smart manufacturing, a lot of definitions, and those are all available. We won't go over any of those, but those are the things that we covered in our first session. Today, it's really about the actual pragmatic implementation of strategies that was used at Jergens. And I do want to give Erica a moment to introduce a little bit more about the Smart Manufacturing Cluster.
Great, thank you, Ron. So good afternoon. Thank you to everybody who's joining us. Here at Team Neo, we help to convene the Smart Manufacturing Cluster, which is a regional effort across Northeast Ohio to advance innovation in manufacturing. So we look at all different types of things. We look at, from very much on the floor to robotics, or, putting sensors on machines to watch for, to see how well they're working and to watch for predictive maintenance, to also talking with leadership about how to implement change within your organization and how to get your organization on board with smart manufacturing. So those are some of the topics that we cover with the cluster. Our cluster is made up of a number of nonprofit organizations, including Manufacturing Works. So we're very excited to have all of those folks be members. We also have our industrial partners, like Jergens has participated in many of our cluster events throughout the years. So you'll be seeing more from us come later this year as the Magna Manufacturing Blueprint gets announced. We're getting ready to update our website, so I'll put a link for that in the chat. And we're just driven by the manufacturers for whatever they need to help implement innovation. And we are very excited to be hosting these webinars, or sponsoring these webinars about innovation in manufacturing. So I'll hand it back over to you, but thank you all for coming.
Great, thank you, Erica. Yeah, and if you are interested in participating with the Smart Manufacturing Cluster, please feel free to reach out to Erica, Rick, or myself at any time. We'd love to have that conversation. And with that, I'll go ahead and we'll advance one more slide, and I'll turn it over to Kurt Schron with Jergens.
Thank you. So We are going to be talking today about our implementation of one of our tool sets of data-driven manufacturing. So I'll just refresh kind of what Ron said about last week's webinar series, where we talked a lot more about data-driven manufacturing and how it kind of circles the whole environment and circles everything. And so what we're talking about today really is one kind of pillar or one application of that. And so what we're doing here was trying to find a place where we needed new data. So really what we're talking about here is being able to get more actionable, faster, quicker, better data to drive those data-driven manufacturing decisions. So, you know, our application, what we're talking about, could be used in lots of probably different ways or ways to think about how to do this. But really the reason to do this is to get that data, to get the better data, to make that better decision. And so you'll see how we kind of went through solution providers, applications and picking and did all those kind of things. But at the same point, a lot of these different solution providers or a lot of these different ways to do this are going to be very different by each company and by each, you know, kind of process that people would go through. So feel free, like they said, if you have any questions, shout them out, raise your hand, use the chat. So I think the first step I wanted to show you guys was kind of where our environment is, because I think our environment and everybody's environment is going to dictate different decisions as you kind of move through. So Jergens, we're an industrial manufacturer. We have a large mix of products in terms of both size and quantity that we use and ship. So we do, you know, small order custom jobs all the way up to larger production kind of runs. So we have a wide variety of different applications that are going to go through our floor. We use Infor Sightline as our CRM, lots of different ways. We do our machine loading for CNCs. At the time when we first started this, and there'll be another slide here on timeline, we had limited hardwire and limited Wi-Fi in the plant on the shop floor. But at the time and still today, our employees clock in and out of jobs with shop track terminals, centralized terminals. That's how they log, you know, whether they started a job, finished a job, how many pieces they did for that job. So next slide, please. So this is kind of our timeline of where we really started and how we progressed through this decision-making timeline. So we started out, you know, a bunch of our executives went to Blockland, and we really, you know, again, going back to the whole data-driven manufacturing, that's really where it started for us, was saying, how can we get more digital? How can we get more, you know, focused on data? And so while Blockland and blockchain doesn't necessarily apply to anything we're talking about here, it was really the catalyst to kickstart the ideas. And so then we attended a Team Neo Smart Cluster event and identified that this was really a place where we didn't have data on machine monitoring. We didn't have data coming from our machines. So that shop track and how the employees entered that data was really the only place we had access to that data. So we wanted to get more granular, faster, quicker, better data coming off of our machines, which we knew would be possible. So we met with a lot of people internally, executives, shop floor supervisors, operators, pretty much everybody throughout all levels of the organization to see what they thought would be important as we were going through this process, what they would like to be the outcomes, what they would like to you know, see happen with this. And we'll get into some more of that as we go. And then we had one of the solution providers, Hitachi, was at the time offering free workshop sessions. So it was very nice. They came, met with a lot of our subject matter experts from their team, from our team, and we kind of talked through all the different aspects, kind of very similar to what we talked about last week with different applications of data-driven manufacturing, and isolated a few of the different key things that we thought would be important. Then we went in and started vendor selection of all the different vendors that we wanted to look at. Had them all come in, give us presentations and things like that, and then made a final selection. So now we're going to talk through a little bit about those different things of this timeline. So early on in the process, we did an IoT Readiness Assessment. And so this is on the right, you can see kind of where we fell versus the industry. And so some key advantages we looked at and some key disadvantages. We saw that we had buy-in from the top level of our organization all the way through. We have a manufacturing engineering team that understood where we were going and had the ability and capacity to take on a project like this. And so we identified that our goal was to utilize this data to increase machine uptime and utilization and reduce downtime for our machines. Some of the things that we saw that were disadvantages for us, we have a lot of legacy machines. We have machines here from, the 40s all the way up through new machines that there's one actually being installed literally today on the floor. So we have little historical data on some of that downtime based off the fact that we don't have this data. We have that high mix, low volume environment. So we have lots of different things going on. So being able to be consistent and track data through time is a challenge in that kind of environment. And same with the multiple different product lines with very different cycle times. So being able to compare A versus B when day one versus day two is going to be very different for us. So it's a challenging environment to kind of have a predictive nature to it.
Hey, Kurt, quick question from Ron here. The IoT Readiness Assessment that you speak to, is that the same one that is on the Team Neo website, or is this something else?
Yes, this is that one. So I'm not sure if it's
right.
over time, but you can see we took this, a couple of years ago at this point now. But it was that one. I'm sure they may have made some updates or changes to it, but that's the same one. Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, Ron. So we've actually now called it the Data-Driven Manufacturing Readiness Assessment after the experience that, of course, Jergens had. And it's actually been drastically reduced. It's much easier. You can do the readiness assessment in 10 minutes. And it gives us a lot of insight that fills in what Kurt is going to be explaining as he goes through the rest of the slides.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Next slide here. So again, from the last presentation, we talked about a lot of the different terminology, IoT or industrial Internet of Things. Those kind of things really are data-driven manufacturing. It's all one and the same term that we should be using now. And so these are what we identified by talking to our executives, our supervisors, our shop floor operators, of things that we couldn't do today or weren't doing very good today, that we were hoping that bringing in some new technology and bringing in new monitoring was going to help with. So we were very reactive at times to when a machine goes down. We don't know even when a machine goes down. At the time, employees operators would have to go walk around the floor trying to find their supervisor to be able to tell them that the machine was down. And the supervisor would have to walk around and try and find the maintenance people to tell them the machine was down to be able to go back and do that. So a lot of that was a really big pain point. Job counts were inaccurate, which causes lots of challenges throughout the floor in terms of both inventory planning, order planning, accounting, all sorts of different ways. And then ultimately we had no data on why. So because when these things went down, maintenance might have been called, might not have been called, might have just been walking by and fixed it. We don't have good tracking on why things happened or when they happened, how many times they were happening. And so those are a lot of the things we were trying to get some better data on. And so our metrics that we identified that we wanted to really focus on were utilization of our machines, automated good total part counts, uptime, downtime reason tracking. And so that's what we were looking to get out of our project here. So as we were going through this, we tried to capture as much information as we could from both Team Neo, Manufacturing Works, as many people as we could talk through. And so these were the biggest points that we saw as failures that other people were making, and we tried to do our best not to make. So a lack of alignment between challenges and KPIs. So that's a lot of what we just talked about in terms of we were trying to align our business challenges we had with those different KPIs to say, hey, if we can hit these KPIs, then we know we're solving our business challenges. Workforce doesn't embrace the new approach. We tried to work with all of our operators, supervisors throughout the shop floor to say, hey, here's what we're working on, here's what we're going through, here's why we're doing this, to really have a buy-in from everybody that it's going on. So focusing shifts on technology, not improvement. So really, again, the whole crux of data-driven manufacturing is not the cool new technology, it's not the graphs, it's using that to make a different decision tomorrow. It's using that data to drive the next decision to make a better decision. And so in terms of ROI and failure of imagination or tunnel vision, those are places where we always continually, and even today, because this is always a journey, are trying to say, what's the next, what's possible? So we're looking at a full scope of what's possible rather than just trying to take what a vendor or a solution provider is offering to us and saying, hey, here's where we'd like to be. How can we get there, rather than how can we implement this technology or implement this solution? Next step. So when we started to then have our KPIs, have our metrics we were looking to improve on, we started to look at different vendors and what they had to offer. And so we came up with what you see on the left is all of our requirements, and then some of our nice to haves of what we were looking for when we were assessing our vendors. So what we wanted to be able to do was have a robust solution that was going to solve our 6-month challenges, but also solve our 18, 24-month challenges down the line that we could grow with, work with, and really have lots of different solutions that we would be able to add on, use the data in a different way. So for us, having that access to that data at the underlying level, rather than just the output that the solution provider might have been providing, was very important to us. We also really wanted key alerts and pings and triggers. And so what we call that is that when that machine goes down, there's nobody having to go find somebody else to tell them. They're all going to get an alert on their phone, on their computer, email, etc., all the different ways. Therefore, it's instantaneous, real time, as proactive as possible. It's still reactive in the sense that that machine had to have gone down for those alerts to go up, but it's limiting that time of the time it needs for when an incident happens to when it can be fixed and back up. Dashboards available everywhere. So we put up monitors across our floor, but also being able to see things on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, at your desk, all those different places where we be able to see them. Integration with Sightline. So this was one of our biggest ones, is that we, again, wanted that data to be able to be used by our people without having to jump through lots of different hoops. So most people live in our ERP. I'm sure that's probably common for a lot of places, that when we wanted them to be able to see all that same data within that same interface, and for their operators, they were comfortable with ShopTrack. They were comfortable going to that place to enter in their job counts, to start their job, to go populate all that data. So how can we work within some of those different workflows to really bring it all back in? So some of our nice to haves, we certainly, we're looking at, we have machines, but then we also have manual assembly stations. And how can we, partner with that in terms of, there's not necessarily a machine there, but maybe we could add sensors. We could do some different things like that. So that's still a process that we're working through. But again, that was one of our nice to have kind of lists, as well as tracking of different assets and things like that. A lot of these different solutions have different pieces that you can kind of bolt on or add on to those different things. But those are definitely more nice to haves for us. And so I think as you're looking through different solution providers or different options of what you're looking at, those are kind of different solutions where we can find point solutions to be able to bring in at some point in the time in the future. So one of the big questions we wrestled with, and probably still would today, is this on-premise versus cloud hosted solution. So service providers seem to always fall into one of the two. A lot of the newer providers are very much focused on the cloud hosted solutions, and some of the older ones or some of the ones that are touted as more secure are really more of an on-premise solution. I think there's a lot of pros and cons as anybody's looking through any of these different solutions. I think the theory that on-premise solutions are more secure is probably always challenged and always changing. In recent times, you saw that Microsoft's on-premise solutions for Exchange were the only ones hacked. Their cloud Office 365 was not hacked because of the fact that a cloud solution has the ability, especially from a provider like Microsoft or something like that, to be constantly updated. They're updating it for not only you, but they're updating it for every one of their other clients. When you're hosting an on-premise solution, you're taking on some of that risk and some of that responsibility to be the one who is doing the updating constantly and always up to date. So there's some of that challenge, but the bigger thing also, I think, to me is the cost. So when you're looking at an on-premise solution, you're probably looking at a higher upfront cost, but potentially a lower lifetime value cost. And then in a cloud solution, you're looking at probably a lower upfront cost. But if you're looking at the solution over a 10-year, long time lifeline, it's probably going to end up costing you more than potentially an on-premise solution. So just different things to think about as you're looking at those different options. But in terms of service, I would expect a lot of the different options on either side are going to be relatively similar. So one of our next steps after we met with all of our vendors was to kind of put them into this matrix. So we had on the vertical axis there, you can see cost, so high to low. And on the left to right, we kind of had an efficacy, what we determined based off our interviews with them, based off reviews we talked to from other customers, anything that we could kind of use to base that off of was in there. And so you can see some fell way to the left and some fell, closer to the right. And so in that little green circle there, the blue boxes are obscuring the actual names of the vendors because we didn't want to publish that right now. But if anybody has any questions, we're happy to discuss some of those things. So in the green circle there, you can see that we had 4 solutions where it was hard for us to determine the actual efficacy, but we could actually obviously determine what the cost would have been. So we kind of laid those on those 2 axes and started to kind of narrow our focus on those 4 to see what we could do to kind of isolate them and determine a better solution or the best solution for us. And so here you can see that we kind of then broke that out into multiple different criteria that you can see on the left. So this on the left aligns very well with the slide we had earlier, which was our key priorities of what we were going to compare our vendors on. And so you can see here it is: cost, timeline, security, sightline connectivity, dashboards, ease of use, advanced analytics. And so then we laid it all out, put in all the information we had. Green, are beneficial for that solution, red are negative for that solution, and all the way down through. And so after we did that, we followed back up with our vendors and said, hey, these are the biggest things that we saw as differentiators between those 3 and all the other ones. And not necessarily that, they were all good at this or they were all bad at this, but there was the difference between them all was the greatest. And so in some cases, certain vendors did not connect with our sightline, and other people were able to connect in different ways, whether it was a 2-way integration or just one way to pass data back and forth. The cost, hardware costs versus cloud server costs. Some offered higher and better advanced analytics capabilities. So especially a lot of the cloud providers will, use your data and be able to provide analytics on top of that data for you. These are, really powerful things, especially right now. I think the world is going through this transition right now of where we can't always understand what the computers are going to be able to come out of with that data, but being able to have that data to run those simulations, those analyses, and let it come back and tell you some of those things is really interesting. The operator HMIs were very different. Some, we took them to the operators and said, hey, which one of these do you like? What do you not like about certain ones of these? And they were able to give us feedback that said some were much better than others. And finally, consulting. So once we have an implementation, being able to come back to the same person and say, hey, Frank, or hey, John, what is going on with this? And having that Frank or John answer, rather than going to a call, center and you get whoever you get, was important to us. So ultimately, based off all of that, this is what our solution, came out of. Was we partnered with a company called Memex to do our machine monitoring. So they had internally, they have their own boards, their own hardware that connects up to machines. They also have over 400 APIs that can connect to different software systems. And we used, they agreed, along with Lake Company, who creates our product called ShopTrack that we use, they agreed all to work as a three-way partnership. So ShopTrack was integrated directly with Memex to be able to have that one HMI, that one interface that always ties back into our sightline, ties back into the same interface that the operators are using that they're happy with, so they can see all their different things and all the different work that they're doing. So it's really a beneficial system for all of us in that we get the best of all those worlds. Lake Company gets the effort to say, go out and promote that they are partnered with Memex. Memex gets to have an instant access to a lot of those ShopTrack customers that already purchased their products. So it's really been a good solution for us. So this is, what, kind of it all came down to. And so these are different things that, from a data-driven manufacturing standpoint, I think are very beneficial in kind of going through what we did. So we took the readiness assessment. We staffed the project with everything that, we needed from a operations standpoint. Created a requirements document for what we wanted to get out of that first project, shopped it, reviewed all our proposals, and then worked with that solution provider to create a strategic deep implementation plan. So one of the biggest things I think come out of this that for us is having those people dedicated to the project and following up on those insights. So once we have an insight, being able to go back and actually work it through to create that plan and actually see the benefits that you get out of that data.
Kurt, could I add a few things here?
Absolutely.
All right. So again, you can go to the website, the Smart Manufacturing website, and take the readiness assessment. That gives us, that being the ecosystem here in Northeast Ohio, the ability to help you out, that being the manufacturer, trying to find exactly where you need the most help to be able to implement a data-driven manufacturing. It does include things like technology that's required. It also addresses training, any training needs. All those things will, of course, have to be addressed if you're going to be taking on that journey. So the other thing it does is amplify, allows us to pull enough information together that we can help you then find a solution provider that can fill in those gaps that are identified in the readiness assessment. And then again, working with the ecosystem here in Northeast Ohio, again, between Team Neo and friends, and for that matter, even Manufacturing Works, we can also help identify low-hanging fruit for your first pilot project, help you then also get an indoctrination, a little bit of indoctrination training so that your staff is willing to make or is capable of making some decisions about what is going to be the most effective a pilot project for your particular, your first whack at this activity. Then we can also introduce you to solution providers that you can then shop your readiness, your requirements document to. And then we can also, after that fact, people like Team also have access to funding. And again, the training requirements could also be addressed. So between us all, again, Manufacturing Works, Magnet, and Team Neo, we can help you walk through all those needs that you're going to be addressing and finding that you're going to need help with, so that you are successful in your journey and your first implementation of the data-driven manufacturing. So don't hesitate there's no reason you need to be an expert in every one of these areas. There are people and the organizations around here ready to help you through this whole process.
So Kurt, this is Ron. I've got a question for you. Just a little bit, if you can speak to it, the skill sets of the people that you got on your teams, both the team that helped you select the vendors and maybe even the teams that help with the implementation. Any takeaways for the group, the types of skill sets that are needed for going down this path?
Yeah, so I think our team, which I think was a strong team, was skill sets from across the organization. So I'll keep bringing that in terms of operators, manufacturing supervisors, all the way through executives. Being able to, because they're going to all be the ones using it, and so they come with a little bit of a different lens and a little bit of a flair. And so that is really important to see what's important to them, because they're going to be the ones that are ultimately needing to drive the insights coming out of here. So that's really important. And I think there does need to be one data leader. This person doesn't need to be a high level analytics guru, but there does need to be somebody who, maybe from an IT perspective, is the leader in terms of understanding the data, understanding where it's coming from, understanding how to process it, how to use it, and really focused on that kind of role.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to ask a little bit, because you talked about, well, you have a lot of brands of equipment, you have a lot of ages of equipment, you mentioned legacy, and you spoke a little bit about the hardware interfaces, but was that challenging for your group as far as selecting what machines to monitor? Did you eliminate some because you couldn't get the type of interface you wanted? How did that play out for you in the whole program?
Yeah, so again, we started out with a real commitment to this journey, and so we did a couple different things. One, we outfitted the entire floor with hardware drops. So every machine has internet and hardwired internet ready to be hooked up. So that was rather than doing only the machines that we knew we would need for this first implementation, we went ahead and it was a bit of a cost savings, but at the time it was a little bit extra investment to do all the drops across the whole floor. We also implemented several new access points from a wireless perspective to get really good coverage across our floor. We were able to do little ping tests as we walked across the floor. We know that there's a lot of environments where that can be a challenge. We actually, have had pretty good success with coverage across our floor of Wi-Fi's, so we're happy with that. And the hardware drops worked really well. Hardwired drops worked really well for us too. So when we did all the drops, we then went back and tried to, more to your question, like how do we select which machines to use? And so we really focused on, the machines that were easiest for us to either hook up and or the most impactful to what we thought would be impactful to our business. So ones where we saw they were going down a lot, so we wanted more information on them, or some of the ones that, we had a brand new at the time, relatively, a month, 2 months old. It had everything we ever needed to hook up. So all we did was take a wire and plug it in. And so that was an easy one to say that's on the front burner of the list. Then we also really leaned on our vendor to really look at, these are the machines that we would like to hook up. Which ones are going to fall on the spectrum of really hard to really easy. And so they were able to kind of identify those for us and say, hey, these ones are going to be really easy and these ones are going to be a little bit harder. And so we kind of focused then on which ones are going to be a little bit easier for us, because this is new to us. This is a journey. This is the first step of the journey. We don't want to make it the biggest step we had to make. So we made it really a relatively easy step, but something that was still going to be impactful for the business.
Great, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The other question I have is, you did say something where you went back to each of the solution providers and kind of gave them, at least my interpretation, you went back to them and you provided them with some feedback of where they kind of laid out. Did you find out that maybe, these are pretty complicated systems, did you find out that maybe you missed something? Or is there anything that, any revelations when you went back to the vendors that led your team, that maybe somebody moved a quadrant over, or et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that the whole end of the, what our solution ended up being was because we went back to them. And so we went back to certain ones and said, hey, you don't connect with Sightline at all. What can we do to make this work a little bit better? And they said, that's not in our roadmap. It's not in our plan. We're not going to do that. And so we said, okay, that's, your decision, we're doing. And then from a Memex perspective, they said, well, what if we worked with Lake Company? And so from them, again, kind of unpacking them, they already had all these 400 APIs. They'd already kind of done all the work. And so they really went to Lake Company and said, hey, if you want to spend a little bit of time, our APIs are already all developed. So Memex really didn't have to do any actual work. And Lake Company was able to take that work and implement it into their solution. And their goal, again, was to, if they can implement that solution into their product, they can be more marketable to the rest of the world. And so that's why that solution kind of came out of, going back to them and saying, hey, how can we make this? Because they pitched us a deep integration with Sightline, but it was a deep and expensive integration with Sightline. So we said, how can we rework this to make it really work for everybody? And so I think that coming back to those solution providers definitely was able to be insightful in different ways, for depending on how they answered them.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Kurt. So as you were going through the process, did you have to upskill a lot of your existing employees, and did it make sense to expand and add some additional new employment to your staffs?
So we didn't add any additional staff, but we definitely, there's a constant upskilling, I think, for this data-driven manufacturing journey. Using data to make every decision, depending upon each individual, is going to be new. It's going to be different. Especially some of the people that we've seen embrace this the most have been our shop floor supervisors. To date, previously, they had to, talk to all their operators, talk to all their, figure out all these different pieces of data that they were getting piecemeal here and there of, hey, my machine broke last week. That's why I didn't have as many hours as I needed and all these kinds of things. Now they have dashboards. They have everything laid out just for them. They can slice, dice, they can manipulate the data, and they've really embraced it. So that's one of the biggest revelations I've seen from this, is that those supervisors who previously might not have been very data friendly in terms of using it, having access to it, now they have access to lots of data, and they're really embracing that and using it. And so they're coming up with even ideas about, hey, can I get an operator report for my operators every month that I can just print off and give to them? And then they can use that every 12 months to come back and say, hey, look how well I've been doing. How can we utilize that skill set as, in a different way, for the operators? So.
Yeah, once you mentioned that, have you been able to, I guess, pseudo optimize your continuous improvement process now that you've got all this data available?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking to improve any and everything that we're doing. So, like from a continuous improvement standpoint, these things are, 1% better is a mantra we've heard and used. And like, so if every day we can get 1% better, that adds a large percent to over time. So definitely utilizing that data to do that.
You've also mentioned, at least at the last presentation, the importance of your ability to use some of the nice tools out there that support this. One of those that I think you've mentioned was the Power BI, Microsoft Power BI. It's suite then too. You want to say a little bit more about how that has become much more sophisticated then over time?
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to very similarly how we structured this program is that we wanted one interface for most of our employees to use. So they wouldn't have to jump from piecemeal to Microsoft Power BI for us is that one-stop shop that we can bring all of this data as well as all of our ERP data, as well as a lot of our other pieces of data into one-stop shop for them. So they, as I was describing, the supervisors being very data hungry, that's their place to go get that data. At the same point, there's within Power BI, we built applications for them through Microsoft's Power Platform where they can notify the maintenance staff of different things that are down. So the machine might not be down, but we say this machine's going to be down in a week because of, they can see something that's going on in there. It's not really necessarily predictive maintenance in that sense because the data is not driving it, but it's being driven by the supervisors that notice something, or maybe a light's out on the top of the machine. They'll put it as a low priority, but tell the maintenance staff, hey, this machine needs some work. Don't do it right now. Don't take down production time. But if we can do this off hours and fix that light, great, let's do that. And so all those different things are being brought into Microsoft Power BI, and that Power Platform is able to drive lots of those different decisions. And so one of the reports that we're working on right now, we don't have it developed quite yet, is an application where supervisors notice that job counts are way off. So somebody was supposed to do a job for 100 pieces. They're doing it for 1,000 pieces. The operator accidentally entered fat-fingered an extra zero. Not the actual job didn't go for 1,000 pieces. He typed in 1,000 when he meant to type in 100. And so they can see that it's going to go through all the costings, all going to be, in trouble if that rolls through. But if they can catch it that day and just make that quick change, that'll happen. Now we're giving them a button without having to go back to Sightline to make a bunch of those changes that the supervisor would have to do. They can do that all within Power BI. We'll give them a button to make that change and flow it all through. So again, it even brings that closer to a one-stop shop that they can do everything that they need to do in there. And those ideas are being driven by those supervisors, by those operators. I'm not out there being able to do that, but they can flow those ideas up to us and we can make those things happen. So it's really great.
Another question for you, following that same theme. Were you able to get all the KPIs you were looking for on your wish list? Was Memex able to help you with that, or are you still adding some today?
Yeah, I mean, we're still definitely adding things today. Our wish list was pretty long, but we were able to get a lot of the different things from the metrics that we were looking to have in terms of utilization, uptime, downtime indicators, some of those other ones that were on there. We were able to get all of those at that time from Memex. But now we've even taken that a step further and said, hey, we wanted all of these things, and we said we didn't have a historical context to that. But by doing some data manipulation, we've actually been able to back into a lot of those different things. And then we are able to publish that through Power BI and see those different things. It might be a little bit different context than what we originally thought of, but it still gives us the right data that we're looking to drive.
Have you been able to add some additional sensors for example, KPIs associated with predictive maintenance?
So that's, to us, it had not been a key focus that we wanted to go after. So it kind of goes back to the very beginning of limiting your focus into what you think you're going to need to do. Right now, our maintenance program is working really well. At some point, that'd be something that we would want to do yes. But at this point, we have enough other things that we're kind of focusing on that's not one we've chosen to focus on. But that's something that I think would be very beneficial to us in the future.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'd like to just jump back and just ask a question. I see one's posted, and I'm going to get to that real quick. But along with the Microsoft Power Apps and that world, and the input that you have from the shop floor, so can you tell us a little bit about, are these regularly scheduled meetings? Are they ad hoc? Somebody comes up with an idea, and is it the IT department that's developing? It sounds like you're kind of developing a Microsoft Power App shop there, or do you go outside? Are you doing it inside, outside? Can you talk to us a little bit about how that process works for the continuous improvement?
We're doing it inside, but there are definitely Power Apps developers and other Microsoft, shops that will customize and do all this work for you. And there's a lot of them are really great. A lot of them will do it. That I know some that are in here in North Ohio. I know some that are geographically larger that could certainly help you. And so for us, Power Apps again is driving a lot of that change. So within the Power BI system, there's a commenting tool that they can tag specific, even individual elements within a page and comment and tag different people. So myself, T resources, they'll put at, Kurt Schron or at whoever and say, can you make this change? So without even having to schedule a meeting, without even having to come up and talk to us, without even having to do these things, we get links directly to what they want to see changed. And we're able to make that on the fly, publish it back up, and just let them go with that. In terms of resources, we just hired a new intern. He's an econ major, but he had an interest in data analytics, and he's been here 1 week, and he's published several apps for us. And several apps and changes to these apps for them. So these are things that people can learn relatively fast. He's never done these things before, but once the data is structured in the right way, it makes a lot of these tools really easy to manipulate and work with. And so there's definitely there's large number of resources that could probably do this kind of work.
Well, that's actually probably a very good segue to the question that was posted, and it had to do with the question is, do you have any issues with pushback within the organization at different levels, shop floor, supervisors, leadership for implementing DDM? And I'm just going to add to that. And part of that, those issues might be because of the speed of change. You just talked about how quickly things can happen. So how do you guys address that? Have you gotten some pushback? How do you handle the rapid movement forward?
So I don't know if pushback would be the right word to use, but we have certainly seen some challenges implementing the full solution, in the sense that in certain areas of the business, I'll go back again to the supervisors on the manufacturing floor. They've embraced this. They've been working really hard. They've come to, we have training sessions every month just to refresh, people's knowledge. And like you said, things are changing. We published, 5 changes probably this week already in this short week. And so, maybe they're minor changes, maybe nobody even noticed them, but we keep the running log of those things. And so every month we'll come back and say, hey, you also can do it this way. Here's how you can export the data to Excel to be able to manipulate it in more ways for you specifically. So there's a lot of things that, those guys come to those, trainings a lot of times. We have had other people who, maybe haven't come to the trainings, haven't learned all the tools. They're too busy doing other things, and it is what it is, and so those are things that we're evolving through and working through. So it's not pushback in that sense. It's just a lack of usage of it. But a lot of those same people, I just had one of the people I'm thinking of in my head was up here yesterday at my desk. We were working through and he goes, oh, and then he had a light bulb moment and said, how could I look at this because he was looking at different margin levels of some of our sales and said, how could I break this down by item? And I showed him one click how you can do that. And he goes, oh, and then, and so I think it just takes some people a moment to have some of those aha moments to really see how they can manipulate, how they can use that to their full potential.
Thank you. That was good. So would you say at this Sage, like percentage of equipment that's, well, there were two things. There was the physical equipment you mentioned. Then you said the assembly areas. And I know for any of us that have been in assembly, that's a particularly difficult thing to monitor because you've got a lot of things happening, a lot of hands-on, I would imagine. So I just wanted to ask first about the percentage of equipment that might be attached with monitoring equipment and feeding data. And then on the assembly, anything that you've done there that you could speak to?
Yeah, so we're about a quarter of our equipment's hooked up with MEMX monitoring solutions, but at the same point, like I said, we've kind of backed into some of our other data that we might be able to use on some of the older legacy equipment into some different KPIs, some different metrics that we think are still impactful for us, and that supervisors are able to glean a lot of that utilization, a lot of the downtime, a lot of the maintenance issues that were popping up before in different ways. And so utilizing the Power BI, utilizing the Power Apps, we're able to solve some of those things in different ways. So we're kind of rethinking how much sensors we really need on some of those older ones based off some of this learning that we're doing. So we're about a quarter there. And then on the assembly side, we haven't been able to solve that necessarily. So to your point, there's a lot of challenges. We do also within our assembly stations, we have some fully auto assembly robotics and some semi-automatic. And so we've really focused, again, using that data to drive how can we utilize those resources even better. And so that's really what's been the drive from a data-driven manufacturing standpoint is how can we focus on driving the right products through those when those up and keeping those having the same uptime as the rest of the floor. So
thank you. Yeah, I have one other question. We've talked a lot about data. Where's all of it stored? Is it stored on the cloud? Is it stored on premise? And then do you have like a policy on purging the data at a certain time or is it just not a big issue with the low cost of storing data?
Yeah, so I think if you ask other people, you might get a different answer than what you get from me. But for me is I hope we never purge a single piece of data. I mean, because you don't know what you're going to use for tomorrow. So I know there's a lot of people that say there should be cleanup and you should only keep what you're going to plan to use. But I don't know what we're going to plan to use tomorrow. So I'm a proponent of buying some cheap storage and keeping it, for a long period of time. But for our purpose, we're mostly on premise in terms of where we keep our data. I know to move into some backups and things like that on the cloud and things. And then Power BI though, as a service is cloud hosted. It's still driving all of its data from on premise. So there's a sync process that moves it back and forth. But again, then we're relying on Microsoft security, in terms of how we can authenticate to get to that data within the cloud. And so.
Okay, thanks. Good answer. I will say too, closing comments, Kurt. I know we're at about 4 minutes before the top of the hour. Any closing comments?
For me, so I would just say data-driven manufacturing is key to a lot of different things. And so I know you mentioned with my earlier background, this is where I've focused my career on, whether it was in manufacturing or within financial services or anything like that. That's how Capital One became who Capital One is by taking data, analyzing it, and breaking it down. Just using financial service data and credit policy data versus when we come to a manufacturing floor, using manufacturing data, breaking it down. How can we solve a problem using data? And so that to us is how we're using and how we're looking at all this impactful. So I think it can be impactful for any organization.
Very good. Thank you so much. Here's our contact information for those of you that would like to reach out. I will also say the webinar will get posted probably within a day up to our YouTube site. And we very much appreciate everything brought to us from the Smart Manufacturing Cluster, from Rick Earles and Team Neo and their sponsorship of these programs. and especially Kurt, yourself and your team for sharing with us at least this part of your journey to date. So thank you all very much.
Can I have one more question.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
So Kurt, how has the business performance improved since you've actually implemented this data-driven manufacturing?
So, I mean, business has definitely improved. Our utilization is up. Our financial performance is up, you know, in terms of the sense that from a manufacturing floor, one of the key focuses that we were able to come out of from this was our unattended hours. So we put a lot of technology, a lot of money, financial backing into resources to allow machines to be run unattended. And like I said, our fully autonomous assembly robots. But at the same point, we weren't tracking and utilizing those to their fullest extent. So how could we use that? And so this is, again, just using data to drive back to some of those decisions to be able to really see the full impact of some of those, you know, investments we've made. So it's definitely been good.
Thank you.
Very good. So thank you once again, everyone.
Yes.
Hope you had a delightful time, and we definitely enjoyed the conversation and the insight. So thank you, and we'll go ahead and stop the recording now.